and then we will go ahead and get started with this evening's program. Family Get Through This, Coping with Childhood Cancer. It's presented by Andrea Patenaude at Dana-Farber Cancer Institute and Andrea Lone at University of California, San Francisco. And if we can go to the next slide, I do want to start the program off by just thanking CareSearch's sponsor. We received a very generous grant from the American Legion Child Welfare Foundation, and they are making this and our other parent webinars possible. And there's one more webinar scheduled for later in the fall in November that our same presenters this evening will be giving about forming a caring group in your community to have your neighbors and your families and your friends and your personal community help you out with sort of moving through the process and giving you the support that you need. So we also invite you to participate in that. Tonight's presenters, as I mentioned, Andrea Patenaude is with, she's a clinical and research psychologist at Dana-Farber Cancer Institute in Boston, and Anne Lown is a public health researcher and is also the mother of a 10-year survivor of childhood cancer. Next slide, please. So Andrea, with that, Dr. Patenaude, I'll turn the program over to you.
Very good. Thank you, Erica, and welcome, everybody. We're very glad to have you join us tonight, and we hope that this will be a helpful discussion for you. This is really a talk about things that you are actually experts on, perhaps unfortunately, but you know perhaps better than anybody the challenges arising for parents when a child is diagnosed with cancer and treated for cancer. And our hope is that by talking together we can think about some ways that will make things going forward possibly a little easier. You may feel like you have some more ideas for what to do to help make your energies go further, because parents may always wish for more energy, but particularly under these circumstances, you feel torn about needing to be in many different places at once, and we'd like to help you think about some ways that perhaps might make that easier. We'd like to help you think about where within the hospital there may be sources of help, and just in general how to kind of feel like you can touch base with the old self and experiences and family life that existed before the childhood cancer diagnosis in one of your children, and the new life and self, which includes the hospital and people in the hospital and many different people who may not have been part of your life before. And very important, we want to have time for discussion and questions. This really is meant to be a two-way conversation. So we will look forward to meeting you through your questions a little bit later. We thought that we would start by sharing a video, perhaps to give us all some common focus, that is a very evocative, I think, poem that a mother wrote about her child, and it's really spoken to her child, who is dealing with a childhood cancer, and then we will move on. So,
Andrea, I'm giving you the controls now.
It's somehow it's not full. Yeah.
There
Okay.
you go.
Okay, very good. Thank you. So the audio, I don't know whether others have the same audio issues, but wasn't able to hear quite the music that made it. But I hope that, I'm sure that some of it rang true and really brought out what are really some of the inherent dilemmas, I think, that are very difficult for parents, that are what the slide speaks to, which is that just at the moment when you are trying to deal with the worst fears that you perhaps have ever felt, at the same time, you're being called upon to help support your child and to try to act calm and to be a real bastion of strength. And that can be very, very difficult. I think there are many of these inherent dilemmas where what you feel like doing and what you are there to do and are being asked to do are very different things. There are days when you probably like to flee and be anywhere else, and of course, at the same time, you want to be right there by your child, and it can be enormously difficult. And Laum, besides her considerable academic skills, has shared the experience now quite a while ago that you were going through in some sense, and I'm going to ask Anne to say a little bit about her own life experience, which gives her an insight that's very deep and very broad about these issues. Anne?
Okay. So when Andrea and I talked about this presentation, we decided that she would combine her experience and wisdom from her many, many years of working with children and families affected by childhood cancer with words from my journals. I always write prolifically, and particularly during a difficult experience. And so Andrea put together what she thought were sort of key themes that affect a lot of us going through this experience. And I went through my journals and found, quotes and sections that I think speak to some of it. And I just want to say before I read my first section that my daughter is doing very well and healthy, but going back through these sections, you know, it's a great deal of suffering during this time, which I know a lot of people go through. So I'll read the first quote. Sometimes it feels like too much. And this is from April 2nd. My daughter was diagnosed in February. Both girls are asleep. Rick, who's my husband, has gone to work. Tanya, who's the child with cancer, was. Tanya's ANC is 66, which is very, very low. With no immune system, it is a challenge to keep germs down, especially when her sister Rachel is still sick with some bug. We are keeping them on separate floors. Rachel drags around a mask, which she uses for coughing. I am adjusting to our new lives in stages. Sometimes I just cope with the many challenges, but the past several days have felt like too much. 2 sick children, too much grief and worry. I struggle with my faith and feel overwhelmed with despair. Life feels hard. I am insufferable to live with. But several crying sessions and a calm returns, sort of. I just have to believe that we can keep going. And if I start to have trouble, I think of all the things that could be worse, and I'm very expert at this. So I think about how lucky we are. Then I go to the pharmacy to get some oral rehydration fluids for Rachel and some anti-nausea meds for Tanya.
So Anne's very powerful words, and one might wonder how she found the strength and time to record so well what was going on at the time, but we're grateful that she did. I think really speak to how much the world changes and how much our families change after the diagnosis of a serious illness in a child. It may be that if the child's in the hospital, that you're literally in the world of the hospital where things are even more confusing than at home. But even at home, things are vastly different. You know, a child having a cold can be a stress, but not to the extent where one has to worry about the impact that cold might have on a child whose immunity is compromised, and how you feel completely torn and over your head, and yet there is no out, there is no door, except the temporary one that perhaps you can do to go out to the CVS and buy something and be in a world that can equilibrate a little bit, and find a course and find something within yourself that allows you to go on. But I think as you do that, it's really important to realize that this is not your failing. This is really very much being transported, almost like an immigrant, into a whole different world where you don't know the rules, really. You don't know your way around after many years of living in one community or having your family be a certain way. Suddenly it's all different, and that's enormously stressful, enormously hard on people, and may make them, quote, in Anne said, referred to being insufferable to live with. I'm sure she really wasn't, but I can imagine that it was difficult to have such different rules. You and your spouse have different things to, different ways of adjusting, the rules of who does what are suddenly very different, and who is where at what time, and it all comes out among the people that we care about the most, usually our families. So it really is a very, very difficult time, and it's intrinsic to the experience, and important not to feel like it's a failing to feel that way. The other thing that changes is that you previously had a pretty good handle probably on when your child was okay and when your child wasn't okay, maybe not perfect all the time every day, but you had a pretty good general sense, and suddenly it's very difficult to really know whether your child is okay physically and emotionally. We're not going to talk about the physical part, but that obviously is difficult, and but the emotional part, how do you know whether your child is dealing with this in a way that's typical of how kids get through such experiences, or something really happening that really needs more attention? Obviously, they're going to be feeling physically different, and they may be feeling enormously scared. They may be different in the environment of the hospital, or even if they're at home. They sense the fear that parents have, and they know that something is wrong. So it's not unexpected that they themselves may be scared and may turn inward, which is sometimes very hard. Sometimes kids will be a little more aggressive. Sometimes, especially small kids, seem to be kind of moving backwards, losing some of the things they used to be able to do. And it's important to try and talk to the people around you who've seen kids go through this experience, and to get a little bit of an idea of what is normal for kids at these ages.
Do you want me to read the next slide?
Mm-hmm.
So I wrote this about a year and a half after she was diagnosed, and she went off to college while on chemotherapy maintenance. And it was just about what's normal. You just don't know. You don't have normal anymore. So I wrote, I don't feel normal inside. I don't know what normal is. I don't know how other mothers feel when their eldest child goes away to college. I can't tell what aspects of missing her is caught up with normal feelings about a child going to college, and what feelings are related to worrying about her going to college on maintenance chemotherapy. And no one can tell me this either. If I say that I miss Tanya to another mother whose child has gone to college, they always act like what I'm facing is so much bigger and so much harder. I hate that. It separates me from them. It's like no one wants to go where I have to go.
I think, Anne's comments, I think, also speak to the fact that it's not just that you don't know what's normal for your child, but you don't feel normal yourself, and can't find that center that kind of allowed you to to have that strong sense of continuity and of certainty, and that's enormously difficult. Sorry. So we're going to talk just a little bit about some of the things and ways that preschool, the children of different ages, cope with what's going on when they're diagnosed with cancer. We would also like to encourage you to look at the CureSearch website. The Coping with Cancer section has a more extensive discussion about what children of different ages experience and how they talk about illness and how to talk to them about it and so forth. But we're going to go through this just to give you a little bit of a sense. Preschool children don't always have the language, so it may be more challenging to talk to them about what's going on, but it is important to give them, they have some idea of being sick, and it's important to let them particularly know that they didn't do anything wrong. Young kids often feel that sickness or illness is a punishment, and it's important to let them know that they didn't do anything at all wrong, but that sometimes it just happens that kids get sick and the hospital is where they will get better, and that you will be there, and to make sure that you are very clear with them about when you're going to leave either the hospital or even the floor, so that they know, because the consistency of being close to you is really what matters to them a great deal and makes them feel as normal as possible. There are perhaps a blanket or a special toy that may be very important to keep with them if you can, and also to continue to give them some choices to make them feel that there are things they can decide even if they can't decide right now to go home or right now not to have the procedure or whatever else it is that may be happening. That they can have some choices about some things. But mostly it's their closeness to you and the fact that they know you're there and that you're reassuring them that this is the right thing to be happening, to take care of them and to make them better. Slightly older children who are in school, it's a little easier to tell them what they have. It's important that they feel that you're telling them what is true and real, and also that you reassure them that the children of school age know the word cancer, and they often have had adverse experiences of knowing about a grandparent who died, or even ads on TV or television programs, so they know cancer is a serious illness. And it's important that you can reassure them that cancer in children is very treatable these days, and that most children do very well, and that you will continue to tell them what's happening. And also to then ask them, you can encourage them, you can ask them what they understand about what either you have talked to them about or what other people on the staff may have talked to them about, or how they would explain their illness to a friend. That way you get a little sense of what parts they may have taken in and what parts perhaps not so much. It's also important for them to feel that they can trust the people around them, and that's very much up to you in the sense that you model the idea of trusting the nurses. And it may be hard for children. The nurses may sometimes have to do things that hurt the child, and that may make them feel like, you know, the nurse is not their friend. Or and it, again, it's important for you to model that the staff really are there to help them. That can help kids relax as much as possible and give them some idea of what's going to happen. The other thing is that they may be important for them to stay in touch with their siblings or classmates, and you may be able to help that happen. Whatever child experiences may make them feel most normal. But the other thing is that it is important for them to feel like you have expectations of them, whether it's in their behavior, whether it's saying thank you if somebody does something for them, or when they're home, that they may have some chore that's still expected of them. So that feels normal as well, that there's something that is being asked that is the way things used to be. And it also says that you don't feel they're so sick that they can't do any of those things. And finally, that it's good to try to break up treatment so that there are milestones, whether it's finishing a week of chemo, or it doesn't matter what it is. It can be very little times and little treats, but the idea that it's something going on and everybody can share in it, and that there can be times when there's rejoicing as well as worry and pain and challenge. With older children, the signs of distress sometimes are hard to see, sometimes not. Sometimes it's withdrawal, that they won't talk, that they are not letting friends be of help to them. They may be angry or irritable, which is often a sign of depression. They may wind up taking it out on a sibling. It may be that they're actually literally, hurting themselves in some way, taking risks, pushing boundaries, not taking their medicines, not really being the child that they were before, being angrier and at a place where it's very hard to reach them. There we go. So with teens, again, it's important to be honest about what's going on and to tell them what's happening and what they may expect as side effects, so that they're not frightened, and particularly so they don't feel like you're keeping things from them. Respecting their privacy is important, but at the same time, you also need to hear what the doctors are saying, so you need to work out with your teenager how it will work best, whether you all meet together for a while and then perhaps each of you meets alone with a doctor, or whether some other plan that meets the needs of everybody. And it's important to feel like everybody does have needs here and they can't all be met, but you need to work it out. Another important thing is trying to let them know that they don't have to protect you, that you want to know their feelings, that you want to know whether they're angry, even at you, that you want to know what's going on with them, that is really what makes you feel best. And it also is what allows you to help them. Encourage them to continue doing schoolwork if they can, if that's possible, but particularly teenagers are, where their friends, their boyfriends, girlfriends, sometimes even their teachers may be really important supports for them, and trying to encourage that within the limits that are possible, obviously with cell phones and Skype and things like that. It can be easier than it once was, but that also may require some privacy, and trying to give them some of the privacy they need and to give them a sense that they haven't lost all of their independence is challenging, and sometimes you need to talk with them about whether they're feeling that you're overprotecting them, and then to try to work out the things that you can do to change that balance a little bit. If you are feeling that your child is somehow having a particularly difficult time, or if one of your other children is, or you or your spouse, there are people in the hospital who are there to help. And it varies from hospital to hospital, and the roles may be slightly different in different places, but we thought we should go over them because it's a very frequently asked question about, so how is the social worker different from the psychologist, and what does the psychiatrist do that the psychologist doesn't do, et cetera, et cetera. The child life person may be a person who spends a good deal of time with your child in the hospital or in the clinic, and they often are very astute at noticing things that are happening with the child as they play with them, and maybe a good source of some input about whether what they see seems to be what kids normally are doing in this setting or not. They have pretty good norms in place for this experience. Social workers serve many functions in hospital settings, and sometimes it is mainly to deal with arrangements and needed services, or to help with finances, but it also can be very much that they're there to help with the emotional aspects for the child, for the parent. You may need to find out how it works in your hospital, what the social worker's role is, but really telling the social worker about a problem, whether it is a more mundane financial problem or such, or even the emotional problems. If they're not the ones who are there to do the direct service work, they will find the person who is. So they are often a very good conduit for help in a variety of the challenges that may be facing your family. Psychologists typically are doing psychotherapy or helping to support families as they go through this. They may also be doing some neurocognitive testing with children who may be at risk for having some cognitive issues due to their chemotherapy or to surgery or to the nature of some of the medicines they may be taking. and they are often able to see kids inpatient as well as outpatient. And so that's often a source of help, but you may need to find how to access the psychotherapeutic help that may be available. And they're typically people who they're not doing the kind of therapy they might be doing in an outpatient clinic. They're aware of the issues that come up around cancer. They have the flexibility, as do the others, to come and go at the bedside, and that in and of itself may be important, that they can help to navigate the world of the hospital for the child or even for you and your spouse. Psychiatrists may do some of these same things, but they also can help with medication, either for symptoms that the child is having, side effects, or there may be ongoing issues that the child had before they were ill that may require some medication, like ADD or ADHD. And some hospital settings don't have very much psychiatry time on board, but they may be able to access it from the psychiatry clinic. So again, working through somebody that you encounter, the social worker or even the child life specialist, to say, how do I reach a psychiatrist who can help, or how do I find somebody who can sit down with my child and talk with them, can be very helpful and can relieve you of some of the stress of feeling that you're maybe feeling like you don't know how to help the child, or it may be an adjunct to the very many ways in which you do help your child. Sleep is something which is very much influenced by the experience of having a sick child. Parents often talk about how much sleep they've lost, and there is some new research in Australia that has actually shown these differences, that the parents aren't in fact sleeping less well and sleeping less and waking up a great deal more, and this in and of itself is a major contributor to the stress of a parent who's dealing with a child with cancer. And it can make you more irritable, it can make you less available for the child, and can just make day-to-day existence a good deal harder. So a number of things that might help in the hospital or not. Ways to arrange rooms, really things that the hospital staff can do to reduce the number of room entries, which has been shown to be correlated with the loss of sleep and the stress on parents. Ways to make it easier for people to come in and out and not wake everybody up. And ways to take away some of the other things that may be difficult in alternating between home and hospital, which sometimes can be helpful, but also can sometimes be hard. Music, if there's soft music or relaxation tapes, often somebody on the child life staff or the psychology staff can make a relaxation tape for your child or for you that they can listen to as they're going to bed. Having soft music on an iPod may be helpful. And try to make up a new routine for bedtime. This is especially helpful with very small children, where bedtime is a very important place for them to have special time with you and them. Try and fit it around the things that need to be done around bedtime. It can be enormously useful. Trying to get some exercise during the day for a parent who may be sitting by a bedside, but even going up and down the stairs in the hospital, something that gives you a little exercise that may make it more likely you can fall asleep. If you're far from home, trying to call home not just before you go to bed. Sometimes that's soothing, but sometimes it's jangling, depending on what's going on at home, depending on the yearning you may feel to be there. So sometimes giving yourself a little time to equilibrate after the call may be helpful. Not looking at screens except maybe to read is also helpful. Not having too much caffeine during the day. And in the hospital, it may be helpful to have a team meeting with the staff and parents to try and figure out how to reduce the nighttime impact on children. And certainly when people ask you what they can do, one of the things that you might tell them is just to give you some magazines, some short stories, things that can be read when you don't have a lot of time, because it really can be helpful to do a little bit of that before you fall asleep, to help you fall asleep. Distraction can be a very important aid. It's played down, I think, sometimes, but there are many, many things that you're trying to organize. You're trying to organize home. You're trying to organize a hospital trying to think ahead, trying to think about your other children, and the endless cycle of thinking about that will keep you awake. It's important at times to try and put that on a shelf and to think about something much more minor, and which will allow your brain to take a break and to let you fall asleep, which in turn will help you to deal much better with all of those things. And
in the beginning, you know, I felt like, oh, I don't need any sleep. You know, you've got such adrenaline. You're trying to be there for your kid. You're trying to manage everything. And in some ways, I felt that I didn't even want it. But one of the things that a lot of the staff in the hospital kept reminding us is this is a marathon. This is a marathon. This is a long time that you're taking care of your child, depending on the diagnosis, but many of the cancer treatments are really long. And so over time, a lot of parents have to work at sleeping. And, you know, not only do you have to help your kids sleep, where chemo can be very disruptive to their sleep, but then you also have to help you. So I had written in my journal at one point, I've developed a little routine for myself every night so I could sleep. It didn't matter if I was sleeping on that narrow ledge under the window in Tanya's hospital room or whether I was home. Once the lights were off, I would make a list in my mind of all the good things that happened that day, and then all the good things in my life. So Tanya smiled and she laughed when we watched Cinderella. Tanya ate red Jell-O and didn't throw it up. Rachel and I played cards and she won. We had family dinner together. Ellen made us a really lovely dinner. This mattress is really comfortable. The sunset from the day clinic was beautiful. And I really focused on thinking of all the positive things because it calms you down. And then when my mind would wander to think, oh my God, her counts are so low, and you start to think of all the terrible things that could happen, and you stop. And I would tell myself, no, you can think about that later. Now is your time to think about the good things. And then I would go back to the list. And sometimes our minds are so used to worrying that we have to go back to the list over and over. And it is very calming.
It is important to realize that things really do get better with time, that initially you're so overwhelmed, but even a month can make a big difference. And by 6 months, you are into a different routine. It's not home. It's not you know, the usual routine. It's not back to the old normal, and it may not even feel like a new normal, but it is so much better than it is in those initial days after a diagnosis or even during the beginnings of treatment. And you just feel so overwhelmed and stressed and can't imagine life having much of a routine at all. There are some parents for whom it's harder to find that equilibrium. Some research shows that single parents have more chronic distress, or parents who feel that they're operating as a single parent when there's only one person there and there's not another support person for the child. And it may be important to access some of the help that's available within the hospital to try and think about what kind of respite there might be to give you a little bit of time to get some of the perspective that really can help to carry you further. And certainly also non-English speaking parents have a much harder time, as one might imagine. If you can imagine being in a hospital setting in a foreign country, then it's just much more difficult when you're having to translate everything and are really not quite sure what people have been saying. And it's, again, there may be some resources within the hospital, but it may be very important to see if there are perhaps some parents who do speak your language, whose child may have been treated in the past, who might be available to you to help you in some way, or some other members of the community. Perhaps a religious member of the community, but somebody who can help you, who speaks your language and can help to offer some reassurance to you as well.
The next two sections of my journal, I actually went and looked, you know, Andrea was talking about how distress changes over time, and certainly when you're yourself, it's hard to have a perspective. So I went through and sort of found, you know, what did my voice sound like at the different times of treatment. So first I have something that was written on the day she was diagnosed and then 3 months later. The night when she was diagnosed with AML in the emergency department was such a nightmare. Tanya was giving everyone the thumbs up and telling people she was fine. Rick, who's my husband, and who's also a physician, looked pale and was struggling to get on top of the horrible medical information that he understood 100 times better than me. I darted off to the bathroom over and over where I sat on the toilet curled up and crying. Then a quick dash of cold water to the face and back to the room until the feeling swelled up again beyond control. So 3 months later, I'm busy thinking about the cancer and what it means and how we're dealing with it. It's a very different tone. Believe it or not, there are no support groups in the East Bay for families affected by cancer. No groups for kids with cancer. No groups for parents or their siblings. Tanya said that having cancer is 10% dealing with the physical part of the disease and 90% dealing with the emotional part. We agreed there's a lot of treatment for the physical part, but none for the other. She's talking about how we feel, about how she feels and the many, many thoughts of what it is like to worry about whether you will live. We continue to be grateful for all the love and support we have from family and friends, and of course for our 2 girls who we love so much. Monday is Rick and my 24th anniversary, so we are grateful to have each other through this hard time. So, different tone 3 months later, which it's a relatively small period of time, and yet we acclimate.
And it's not that it isn't hard at that point, but it is that you could sort of find space together that felt comfortable, and that was very important too. Anne talked about how she would think about things as she was going to sleep that were good things that had happened during the day. And it really is something that can help to, because it feels some days like everything bad is happening, and but some of the soothing thoughts that really can help you to get to sleep are to think about the fact that cancer, especially cancer in children, is a very treatable illness, that most of the children are cured, that all the children have hard days. So the fact that today may have been hard doesn't mean that things won't get a whole lot better, but it will take time. To think about whether your child is getting good care, that where you are in a place where staff are well trained and are used to dealing with children with cancer, and that everybody is working hard towards the same goal that you want, that your child will be well. That there are thousands of children who have been treated successfully for cancer at this and other hospitals. That with time there's new information and new treatments which hopefully will make things better for your child, just as they have made things dramatically better for children with cancer over the past 30 years. That other parents have walked where you're walking, and that there is hope. And again, as Anne said, the things you're grateful for, and the things you're proud of, even among your, those things about yourself that you may be able to feel good about, and certainly the things about your child, your family, your spouse that may make you proud.
I love this list that Andrea put together on soothing thoughts. I think it's so right on the mark. And we went on through the journal and found lots of gratitude, which wasn't doing on purpose, but there it was. And I think it was soothing. And I would just add one thing to Andrea's list is many of us parents know of another person who had leukemia many, many years ago and was thriving. So one of my daughter's tutors, she was 16 when she was diagnosed, was a leukemia survivor. She had had ALL, she had relapsed, she had a transplant, and she had gone on to do very well. She was a marathon runner. She was wonderful, and having an image like that I think can be incredibly good for you. So I have 2 entries that I'm going to read. First is my husband's, and then one from me around the same time. Once more, he writes, we feel grateful for the wonderful hospital facilities here. We found out last week that funds for the playroom on the oncology floor were raised by friends of Gabe Catalfo. Gabe was a Berkeley High School student who died several years ago of leukemia. Being here, we feel a palpable connection to the patients, families, and friends who have traveled this journey before us, and in so many ways have taken the time and care to make this path just a little easier for those of us who have come after them. And I wrote, also sounding grateful, we so much appreciate all the support in prayers, food, welcome home decorations, calls, and visits. This was, I wrote out to a Yahoo group that we had at the time. That was pre-Caringbridge. Tanya said, Tanya keeps saying that she feels like she's getting better so fast because of all your prayers. I wish I knew how to show my gratefulness in a huge, huge way for all your love. It is such a gift. Thank you.
Sir, I think wonderful that at a time of difficulty, you do feel grateful. You can, and you do get so much support, and that you may not even sometimes from people you didn't know were there. But sometimes one of the hardest things is that the person you're closest to, you may feel like you and he, your spouse, you and she, are in different places or have different ways of dealing, and suddenly you really are not able to feel the closeness that you want to feel, and that can be enormously scary as well. But it's important to know that marriages of parents of children with cancer do survive. There's even some research suggesting that they survive at higher rates than couples in the general population, and many couples report that they wind up feeling closer to each other, even if that may not be true on a particular day or early in treatment or at a particular point. Because often men and women do have different ways of showing and expressing their emotions, and it may kind of go to the fore under the enormous stresses of a diagnosis or some other difficult period. But if you can try to express and to remember that you're both hurting, it's not just one of you, and to even be able to say, you know, this is what really helps me. I like to get away. I like to go out and, you know, go to work, or I like to you know, not talk about it, and the other person may say, well, they really do need to talk about it, and then try and work out that at least know what the other person wants and needs, and that but deep down inside you are feeling very much the same stresses and pressures. And that if you can be at all flexible in allowing your spouse to have a very different style, that can help enormously.
I wrote in my journal, he is not usually the person I talk to anymore. I feel terribly lonely with it all. There is no one I can think to talk to. Rick is fighting off the feelings himself. He is either falling asleep, upset about his work, doing his email, or planning his next run. He doesn't always want to feel all the fear either. Who can blame him? So he is not usually the person I talk to anymore. And I would just say the end of this is, we did talk a lot before the cancer, and we have talked a lot since, but there was a period of time when she was very sick, when our coping, the way we both coped, was very different, and I found that we couldn't provide each other the best support. We had to find it from other people.
But the critical thing about that is that you could recognize it, again, giving each other the flexibility to have different coping styles under such enormous stress is really a sign of health and strength, and also a predictor likely of being able to find each other when the stress recedes. When parents are divorced and they have an ex-spouse to deal with, that can make things very much more complicated. You really need to be able to find a place where the best interest of the child is what you really can come to, and that means that you really need to communicate probably much more frequently and about different things than you did before. One of the places where such issues come up is about who's going to talk to the doctor, and when the doctor is spoken to, who shares that information. So again, trying to make some rules about how that works and trying to stick to them however difficult it may be. The visiting of the child may be difficult, especially if there's a step-parent who you don't feel particularly comfortable with, you don't usually have to see. These things may be very hard, but again, if you can work it out in a way that doesn't stress the child further, that may be very helpful to all of you. Another place where some of the issues can come up are around finances. If one parent was working and is not working now to support the child, the financial role the other parent plays may be a point of great difficulty between the two of you. So again, you may need to find some way to talk about it. And again, this is something that perhaps one of the mental health professionals in the hospital can help you figure out, either together or on your own. what to bring to those conversations to enable them to go better. In general, children who are able to accept help really do better at being able to support their child. And it may really go against your grain. It may not be the style you're used to, but being able to take help in such a crisis situation for your family really means that some people can be doing the things that you don't have to be doing, and that it does become impossible to do it all. And therefore, it's really, really important to try to overcome your own reluctance to let other people help you, and instead to think about things. What could somebody else be doing? What are the little things I'm worried about? Maybe it's finding an electrician for my house because the front light isn't working, or whatever it is. But people are also very glad when you can suggest something they can do. It makes them feel much less helpless. And there are now, as Anne referred to, organizations that may help you to organize food being brought to the house, or other kinds of communication with your caring community, and appointing somebody who can perhaps be the intermediary can be very helpful. But trying to think of ways in which people can be helpful actually ultimately helps your child a great deal.
I can't agree with Andrea more. It really makes a difference. This is from my husband's journal. Anne and I feel incredibly embraced and supported by our family and community. This is a terrible way to learn of the level of love and caring that surrounds us. But this aspect of Tanya's illness is one for which we are truly grateful. We are determined to come through this with the bonds of love woven amongst our immediate family, our extended families, and our community, stronger than before.
We've talked now a number of times about getting peer support from other parents. Sometimes it's in a group in the hospital or an online group, and also for kids themselves to get help. And Anne talked too about finding somebody who's gone through the experience, who can be kind of an icon or a role model for your child, but also for you to feel that that you have a sense that kids do get through it and they do thrive. And in fact, there's recent research that shows that some kids really do come out saying that they are much stronger for the experience of having gone through cancer. Parents may find that too, but kids are often very good at talking about how it's helped them to feel like if they can face cancer and come through, that they can overcome anything, and kids feeling that they have strengths they didn't know they had, and that they understand that people can be there to support them. Some people can feel that they just appreciate life a good deal more, that an average day may be the best thing, that just being able to take it all in a different way. Spirituality is hard. Sometimes parents initially certainly feel like, how can this be happening? But sometimes their spirituality may indeed be strengthened by these experiences, and there may be good things at the end that you can look back on and say, this was not a good experience, but I've learned and grown, and so has my child. And I wish that all of you may find those moments before too long. So we want to wish you all well, but we also want to encourage your questions and discussion. We would be happy if there are comments or questions that any of you want to add to this conversation.
Great, thank you so very much. I want to remind those of you on the phone that you can use the gray box that you have that's part of the control panel under questions to type in your questions to us. We have a couple of questions that have come in so far. I'll throw these out to you both and then let you respond. Two of them I'll put together are about siblings. One is related to help in thinking about about ideas or thoughts about preparing a younger child for going to the hospital, a 5- or 6-year-old child, for what it's going to be like to see their sibling in the hospital with, an IV and in a bed and looking very different. Appears to be a child who's been in the hospital for some time and trying to make a decision about, the younger child wants to see the older child, but how to prepare a kid who's that young. And the second question about siblings is whether or not there needs to be some allowance for slipping in school and in chores as well for the sibling while they adjust to a stressful situation, not just to the child who's being treated.
Well, I'll start, and maybe Anne will have some things to say out of real life experience. And I would say, first of all, that it's very important if a child wants to go to the hospital and see their brother or sister that they be allowed to do that, because in kids' minds, if they can't see their brother or sister, they're imagining all kinds of ways their brother or sister may be, and they're likely to be much worse than the brother or sister actually is. And even if the child in the hospital is quite sick, at least they then feel like they know what's going on because they've been there and they've seen it. It is helpful to try and be very concrete with a 5 or 6-year-old about what kind of bed, what kind of room, will there be somebody else in the room, what about, if there are any tubes, or the person will be hooked up, or they'll be awake, or they are likely to be sleeping, whatever it is. And the child themselves will perhaps have some questions. You should ask them about what it's like, or they may react to something like what the room smells like. It's hard to predict all the time, but it tends to be very concrete things that they want to know. And on the other hand, kids really can see past the tubes and past the noise and all of it, and see their brother or sister there, and can find enormous strength from being included in that scene which again can help them to feel like the family is at least together again. So I would think about asking them beforehand, what else they might want to know about the hospital situation. They'll be interested in what kinds of toys the child's been given. They'll be interested in the playroom and other things. They may it may be very important for them to have time with their brother or sister, but it may also be important for them to be able to leave the room when they're ready to, and to explore the rest of the hospital and the playroom perhaps, to get a sense of what other things are there when they're feeling like they really have sort of as much as they can take in at one time. And then after the experience, I would also debrief them a little bit about what was it like, was it different than they thought, did they have questions that came up from being in the hospital? Would they like to go again? What would they like to do or bring, or all of those things that may be helpful to them to feel like they can do something useful. Is there some game they'd like to play with their brother or sister, if that's possible? So I would keep the conversation going. It can be very helpful to understand what their fears are, or sometimes it's what their jealousies are too. Sometimes the hospital looks very attractive with toys and whatever, and parents who are perhaps staying in the hospital. So it may be quite a gamut that the sibling has in mind when they are thinking about the hospital. Anne?
I won't add anything. I thought that was a terrific answer, but I would say a little bit about the second question about allowance for slipping of the sibling in academics in school. Just to say a general comment about siblings, sometimes we focus a lot on the kid who's sick, but there is some research that shows that many siblings do have a rough time. Many siblings also really rise to the occasion and become very helpful, or they could be both, acting out, not doing their schoolwork, and pulling themselves together. It can be a challenging time for them, but a few things that I really agree with Andrea, talking to the sibling, really listening to them, including them in family and visits to the hospital or family rituals or the things that you all do together, making sure that that sibling knows that they're still rooted in the family. Parents, and myself included, got so busy and so overwhelmed with the care for the sick child that it's hard to be there enough for the sibling. And one idea is, helping that sibling to have an anchor in the world. Maybe it's a teacher, a grandparent, a cousin, an aunt. It's really, if you can't do it all, and parents really can't do it all, helping them to have another key person helps, and also helping to keep the sibling involved in whatever is really special to that kid, whether they're on the baseball team or Girl Scouts or whatever, keeping that routine up.
I agree with that, and I would also add that sometimes parents can't imagine that the other child doesn't realize that if they were sick, you would be there with them in the same extent that you are there caring for your currently sick child. But sometimes the siblings really do get the idea that somehow it means that you love the other child more, and it may even be important to try and address that and to say that you're glad they're healthy, and that it makes you feel good that they're healthy and that they want to do some of the things that they usually do in terms of friends or fun, but that it really isn't that you're spending more time there with them, with the other child, and not with them because you care more about the other child. It's that you love both of your children or all of your children, and sometimes one child needs more at one time and another child might need more or get more, or you might have more time to divide more evenly at another time, but that it's not a matter that you love them any less than you used to or any less than the other child who's sick. I think the other thing about the question about expectations of siblings is that it is challenging in the sense that you want the child to be to know that the expectations, that there are norms, and that not everything has fallen apart in the organization of the family, and that you would like them to be able to do things as well. But the reality is that a child who is stressed themselves really sometimes can't do their homework as well as a child who is a typical child. And I'm sorry about that. So you really may sometimes have to help them to understand that you want them to do the best they can do, and if there's some help that you can get, perhaps you can arrange that, but that if they're really trying hard, that's all that you're asking at this point, and that sometimes it is just really hard to concentrate like they used to. In terms of chores, sometimes it is helpful. It often is helpful for siblings to still feel that their chores and those expectations are the same. As Anne said, sometimes siblings can be enormously helpful around the house to feel like they're assigned certain things, that there are ways in which everybody in the family has to pitch in. So that kind of expectation actually usually, I think, helps kids to feel less anxious rather than more.
Great. We have two other questions, and then I think we will wrap up as we're at the 8 o'clock hour. The first question is asking for some thoughts. It says that their teenage son is early teenage years and often wants to speak to the doctors without the parents there, and parents asking, is that a good idea or not?
Well, I think a child who wants to have that role should probably be respected. I mean, obviously the doctor will at some point speak to the parents as well, but it may be that, sometimes kids try to protect their parents, and it may be that in speaking to the doctor directly, the child can ask the questions he really wants to know without having to worry about whether the answers might be upsetting to his parents. It may also be a way of empowering him to feel like he's more grown up and that he has certain rights as a hospital patient. So in general, I would try to honor that, as long as there are also avenues for you to speak and for the child to know that you're going to speak to the doctor as well. But if he wants to speak individually to the doctor, I think that might be an important time for the doctor to get to know him better and perhaps to feel that he understands some of the issues that the child is having.
I agree. These kids, when they're patients, they have so little power. So many things in their life now are dictated by their treatment needs or cancer. What a great thing that they can make a decision, that they can take a hold of something.
Great, thank you. And our last question is related to grandparents. And it says that my wife and I are in agreement that we want different things from our different sets of parents, but we're struggling to explain that to the grandparents from whom we want less. It's not that we don't want them in our lives, but having them present is more difficult than having the other set present, who will, when the other set is present, they are much more able to simply step in and help as opposed to one set. Any advice?
Oh, Andrea, I'm giving you that.
Well, I think that is an enormously difficult one, although I'm glad that the questioner brought up grandparents, because they share in a lot of the fear, and they are also feeling terrible for you having to go through this and wishing there's some way that they could help. It depends a little bit on the personality of the parents. To be able to, in some families, one can actually say, you know, for practical things, it's actually easier for, you know, so-and-so and so-and-so to do that for us. But I think what may help is trying to think of something, even at a distance, that the other set of parents could do, or that there may be other roles they could play. That may be the best way to try to not hurt their feelings. But you know, this is a time when the stress is really on you, so at some point you may just have to be honest and say, you know, the kids are more used to the other set of grandparents, or you know, it just is easier on you know, that you may get more upset, and that makes it a little hard on us, you know. So what you can do is to take the sibling out for you know, an ice cream cone or something, and but that in general, to have people living in the house, it's actually just easier at the moment for it to be, you know, the other set. You may have to be honest about it. It's obviously very, very tough. Anne, anything that you can add?
No, I mean, I agree with you. We had that problem, so I thought it was a great question. And we did ultimately have to say, this is what works for us. And there was miffed attitudes and all, but years later, I don't think anybody remembers. And finding the right role for the right parent, grandparent seemed to work pretty well.
Great. Okay, well, I want to thank everybody who joined us this evening, and especially thank Anne and Andrea for their participation this evening in presenting us with a really terrific webinar. We certainly hope that everybody found this useful. We will have the webinar recording and the slides from tonight's presentation on the CureSearch website in the Coping with Cancer section by early next week. And for those who wanted to participate in another session, we have in November 19th, we have a, excuse me, November, I think it's November 19th, I'm sorry.
20th,
double check the November 20th. We have another
so.
session on creating a community group and really working with the members of your community to ask for support. So with that, I'll say thank you one more time, and we will have this on our website in the next few days. Thank
Thanks,
you.
everybody. Good night.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night.